It's Katie Crysdale here from Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. I'm back a little bit early this week because I want to talk about a hot topic today, which is lifeguards in Canada use flutterboards or kickboards. I need to set up this conversation a little bit, so bear with me as I give some background and some context. But I had a post I put up on the Lakeview Aquatic Consultants Facebook page this morning. I also put it up on our Instagram. This was a photo I took at Stanley Outdoor Pool here in the city of Calgary, Alberta, last weekend when I was downtown for brunch. The photo shows a lifeguard using a flutterboard or kickboard as their rescue device. I will link to that post in the description box down below. Sometimes I'm a little bit naive about what's going to go viral. I'm always posting content to provide our audience, subscribers, followers, clients, and colleagues value. So I'm never just drive-by posting in attempts to become viral or get a reaction. I'm not doing rage bait. That's not me. That's not the goal of our accounts whatsoever. However, within a few minutes of posting this photo this morning, today is Sunday, July 26th, 2026, comments started to roll in that this was inaccurate, false information. And I want to spend some time talking about what is the reality of lifeguarding here in Canada. I want to address the fact that lifeguarding is not a monolith, and I want to address the program standards as well as the resources and tools available to us in Canada to understand the program. What qualifies me to make these comments is that I am a Life Saving Society of Alberta and Northwest Territories national lifeguard, so I can lifeguard a swimming pool. I've been doing so for over 20 years. Since I was 16, I've been continuously certified. I also, for the last 15 years, have been a national lifeguard instructor, and for at least 10 years, I've also been a national lifeguard instructor trainer. Further to that, I've worked at pools across Alberta, both as a contract leadership instructor teaching original NL classes, National Lifeguard Pool recertifications, in services for pools. I also grew up in Ontario, where I worked at a number of facilities as well as outdoor waterfront. My personal opinions are not endorsed by the Life Saving Society of Alberta and the Northwest Territories or any other Canadian Life Saving Society branch in any province. However, sometimes I feel like I'm the only person sticking their neck out to really point out what the program does say and get away from these fallacies that are invented, this game of broken telephone, where people are very, very clearly confusing employment requirements, personal preferences with program requirements. And that is what I feel has happened here in this particular instance. So I posted a photo of a lifeguard at a City of Calgary pool using a kickboard or flutterboard as their rescue aid. I'm not disputing that a flutterboard or a kickboard is not potentially the best rescue aid. However, it is a permitted rescue aid in the National Lifeguard Program, whether you're in Alberta, Nova Scotia, Saskatchewan, Newfoundland. We've had a lot of people jump into the comments of the chat on the Facebook post, which I'll link down below. The main thing that bothers me, I'm a big girl. I have no problem with people who have concerns. Sorry, this is always the problem with doing a live. I'm a big girl, and I'm not here to say I'm right and you're wrong, or you're wrong and I'm right. One of the things I continue to see in the aquatic industry, though, is this feeling that it's my way or the highway, coming from instructors, trainers, facility operators, people in different regions who are convinced that they know what is correct. They know what is best. They know what is in the program standards, and they're not citing any of these things to back up their point. My background outside of aquatics, I have a Bachelor of Arts degree and a Master of Arts degree. I have 6 extra years of education beyond high school. I rarely bring this up because aquatics and recreation facility management is often very blue collar, and there is no reason if you work in recreation or facilities that you need to have secondary education. I firmly believe it is an appropriate career profession that you can achieve on the job learning and mentorship and be very successful. However, I bring up my bachelor's degree and my master's degree as proof that I know how to critically think and analyze resources. That's where I sometimes feel like I'm the only sane person in the room because I am looking at the materials that are published by the Life Saving Society in my branch. My branch is Alberta and the Northwest Territories. I know them in and out. They've been highlighted, they've been quoted, they've been copied, they've been reviewed and updated. I'm using current editions. I'm not using a copy of a book from when I first became an NLI in 2014 in the current year of 2026. I've done this in many, many videos. I've talked about the importance of understanding within an award guide what is the purpose of the item? How do you do the item? What are the must sees of the item? What are the notes on an item? What are the resources or extra literature to support an item? And nowhere currently in Life Saving Society Canada materials, whether we are focused on the National Lifeguard Program or whether we are looking at leadership programs leading up to lifeguarding, so our lifesaver programs, such as Bronze Star, Bronze Medallion, and Assistant Lifeguard, formerly Bronze Cross. Nowhere in those resources does it indicate that you cannot use a flutterboard or a kickboard. It's the same thing. I'm using the dual terminology because I know in Canada we tend to say flutterboard, in the US you tend to say kickboard. Now, I understand to American and international lifeguards how horrifying this is because the rescue tube or throw bags or other equipment has been the industry standard. It is my perception as an outsider in the United States for a long period of time. So I genuinely appreciated those US commenters on the thread who said, wow, I didn't know this about lifeguarding in Canada. And that is the professional curiosity that I love to see in the engagement with our followers and clients and colleagues. That is the main reason that I post anything on social media is to keep that conversation current and ongoing. And if you look at my caption, it literally says American poolies will be horrified to discover that Canadian lifeguards use flutterboards. I'm not suggesting that we can't move beyond flutterboards. If you go further down in the caption, you will also see that I expect it to change in Canada in my lifetime. I've been a national lifeguard since 2003, so I'm coming up on my 13th recert, so over 20 years. I know that I'm a dinosaur. I'm not the most up to date in on the deck lifeguarding action. I am primarily at this point a leadership instructor, a trainer. I'm less in touch with the day-to-day mechanics. I am aware that many pools have moved to rescue tubes, whether that is in Alberta, British Columbia, Ontario, wherever. That is the employer's choice. That is the organization's choice. That is potentially the trainer or the instructor's choice. I have taught contract national lifeguard courses at pools that didn't have flutter boards for the lifeguards to use. We use tubes. And then I've also taught courses at pools where there were no tubes. We used entirely flutterboards. So the main reason I'm making this video is back to what we talked about a couple months ago when I also naively posted this toe lifting technique for rescuing submerged victims or unconscious victims, I should say, solo. All of the feedback I got on this video is, well, you would never rescue a victim solo. Respectfully, that's another video topic I have to tackle. There are plenty of jurisdictions in North America, never mind around the world, where guards are working solo. One guard on deck, and their backup guard isn't even a guard. It's a customer service representative, it's a towel attendant, it's a dry facilities attendant. I am not promoting that it is a good idea for an organization to do this, but I'm also not ignorant that it is happening in many jurisdictions, and many people, their first job, when they don't know better, they take on a role where they are working as a single guard. So, to bring it back to this Flutterboard conversation, what made me most frustrated, first of all, was the statement by some early commenters that this is in the Stone Age. This is false information, which is a trigger word right now with all of the AI that's happening in the world. And that claims that this is not realistic. This hasn't been, I'm quoting from the comments in the thread, this hasn't been the case for 15 years in that person's area. And I don't need to respond to the comments, but I do because anybody who's done social media before knows that the momentum of engagement lifts the post, lifts your page, and helps. So I'm not stupid. I'm here to run a business, and it is to my benefit. All engagement is engagement, even if it's trolls or keyboard cowboys or people who don't have the same basic understanding. So you'll see there were also comments about the assumption was that the page, because this is all the Lakeview Aquatic Consultants page, not Katie Crysdale. The assumption is that we're not in Canada when it clearly says in our page bio that we're based in Okotoks, Alberta. We are a Canadian company. I'm Canadian instructor, Canadian trainer. And so I did tag myself to say, look, Katie Crysdale is National Lifeguard, pool on the deck, National Lifeguard instructor for 15 years, National Lifeguard trainer for 10 years. And I'm not representing the Life Saving Society in my personal opinions, but I have experience. And I also want to be very clear when I look at my member record of what I've taught, I have taught at over 20 pools around the province of Alberta, to say nothing of informal in services. So I was looking at my report earlier this morning, and I literally can name 20 individual pools across the province, north to south, east to west. Now, that doesn't make me a better person than somebody who's only taught or only learned or only come up at their pool. There is an importance to that heritage and legacy training as well, and value to being an on the job subject matter expert in your facility training at your facility pool. But we need to be very clear what is the training standard of the National Lifeguard Program, whereby we see things like we teach the ladder approach, we teach rescue aids in our life-saving programs. Nowhere in those early bronze medallion, assistant lifeguard, formerly Bronze Cross, does the aid have to have, as somebody said in one of my comments, 50 newtons of buoyancy. Respectfully, we actually teach the opposite in water safety and drowning prevention. We teach that if you need to use a towel, if you need to throw a food cooler, if you need to use an inflatable unicorn floaty, whatever is available to assist you. Now, we don't want you to be dumb and go out and hurt yourself and use a unicorn floaty as though it's going to save two grown adults when it's not a life saving device. I also know a Flutterboard is not a life saving device. That's very clear. I'm not stupid. However, as the context I want to give, when I first did my bronze courses in the early 2000s, and I recognize I'm a dinosaur because I'm going to be 40 this year, but back in 2002, 2003, 2004, we were handed kickboards in our classes, and that's how we learned to do our rescues. Is it practical in every rescue? Absolutely not. There was another commenter who was trying to say something snide about diving in with a Flutterboard. Very few people I know are diving in with a tube either, or a ring buoy or a throw bag, right? We're leaving it with the leash attached to our wrist, our leg, our body, be that as it may. I learned on Flutterboards. I taught on Flutterboards. I am the best lifeguard that I know on a Flutterboard. That is because that is what I've worked with and adapted and become a master of using in my 20 years on deck. And yes, now I'm not on deck ever, but prior to being a consultant starting in 2018, I was a municipal pool manager for many years, and I was a deck guard for many years. I have thousands of hours guarding swim lessons, lane swim, public swim, swim meets, water polo. I've done my time. I know what I'm talking about. I'm not in an ivory tower, completely removed from reality. All of this is to say, Flutterboards are still predominant in many parts of Canada because they are not banned in the program National Lifeguard. That is a simple thing if we want to be black and white. And you guys know I'm not black and white because I think it really does come down to the situation. And we always want to train our guards or any water safety professional to access their toolkit in the moment. What is my aquatic environment? What is my skill set? What is my rescue type? What is my situation that I'm dealing with? What do I have access to? If you're standing at a pool and the only aid available is a rescue tube, I'm sure a lifeguard who's accustomed to working with a kickboard or flutterboard will grab the tube rather than nothing, because we teach to take an aid all the time, but we don't always get to use the aid, or it's not always practical. So, for example, a flutterboard is not practical with a spinal rollover or spinal boarding, but I'm still going to take the aid with me as I approach because I don't know necessarily it's a spinal until I get to the victim if I didn't witness the mechanism of injury. In Alberta, where I currently live, I moved here in 2013 with the Canadian Red Cross lifeguard program that was only around for less than 10 years. There was a culture shift in Alberta to trying out more tubes. There are definitely pools that have switched fully to tubes, and that is their prerogative as an employer or as an organization who does that onboarding training, that employment training for their guards that supersedes the basic NL training that guards receive in their course. I've also talked about this in lots of other videos for the National Lifeguard playlist. When I teach a National Lifeguard course, I will provide access to a variety of different rescue aids. We will even play around for fun with pool noodles, with pool mats, with inflatable unicorn floaties if there's some nearby, with life jackets or PFDs. There was a commenter in the thread from Quebec who says that life jackets are still one of the very popular choices to throw as an aid. And I'm not throwing, I'm not throwing shade at the province of Quebec. That's just culturally what they do there. I know we did the same thing when I worked at Waterfront in the early 2000s. My point is that the resources, if you have to say that they're black and white, they allow any aid. As a National Lifeguard instructor, if you as a candidate can justify to me, oh yeah, Katie, I grabbed the pool noodle because in this scenario, I was teaching swim lessons and it was within reach as opposed to running down the pool deck to grab the rescue tube, that is a pass in that scenario or situation because it shows an appropriate decision-making process in conjunction with the latter approach, which we use throughout Life Saving Society programs, as well as with the understanding of rescue aids. Would a tube be a better choice based on the buoyancy it can provide? Probably. Almost likely, absolutely, if they have competency with the equipment. But if they don't have competency with the equipment, it is not necessarily inherently a superior choice, or else, in my opinion, the Life Saving Society would have prescribed that as a mandatory piece of equipment. There are lifeguard agencies in the United States, to my knowledge, that have prescribed specific aids like rescue tubes, and that is their prerogative. If you're licensed by Starguard Elite, Ellison Associates, American Red Cross, whatever that looks like, those programs can have prescribed aids. No different from the switch. Those of you who remember the Canadian Red Cross Water Safety Program, we taught preschool lessons, swim kids lessons. We were allowed to pick whatever aid we wanted to work with. So I loved pool noodles. However, now we have the Swim for Life program in Canada from the Life Saving Society. That is the mainstream program, and its focus is more on life jackets or PFDs. That is a program standard. Currently, for National Lifeguard, there is no program standard that you must use tubes. Could I be hired at a specific pool in a specific province, a specific life-saving branch that prescribes tubes? Absolutely. That is allowed as an occupational requirement. No different from a uniform, no different from a grooming policy. But we're missing the forest for the trees when people are so set in believing that there is only one way to do something. And I've seen this so much in the National Lifeguard pool research I've conducted, where I go to a pool because the NLI on staff is unavailable, or sometimes the programmer or the pool supervisor will contact me and say, Katie, you know what? We need a breath of fresh air. All of our staff have been trained by the same person with the same ideas and the same drills and the same scenarios. We understand there's a cost to bringing you in, but we need some fresh perspective, some fresh ideas. And often, what I will see sometimes, unfortunately, is this training that's formulaic, that lacks critical thinking, that lacks analysis of the situation. And I know that maybe this is too deep for Facebook or Instagram. People are scrolling on a Sunday morning and they simply see a photo of a lifeguard with a flutterboard, and it appears as though it's not the aid. I get that. It was not rage bait. It's the reality that a lot of guards are using kickboards or flutterboards across Canada. I'm grateful to one of the original people in the comment who acknowledged that they didn't know the full scope of the industry in their province. I'm not going to name them. This is the other thing. People always use their real names on Facebook without realizing that in 30 seconds, I can put your name into Google and see exactly what facility you manage in exactly what city or province. And I'm not here to troll or dox anyone, but I think people also don't think beyond the ramifications of what they're commenting on sometimes. That doesn't happen as much on Instagram in my experience or YouTube because people have anonymized handles or usernames. But credit to this person who did say, wow, I didn't realize that there was this actually still happening outside of my area because I unfortunately I had to name drop. So I don't feel the need most days of the week to really showcase the circles that I run in and the level of leadership that I do interact with on a daily basis in the different provinces or the different training agencies. I'm not here to point that out to everyone. But in this particular instance, where this person was alleging that flutterboards or kickboards are not used in their province, I did drop a statistic from the executive director of the Life Saving Society in their province based on a private meeting I had recently. And I'm not going to give any more context because it was a private meeting. But this statistic literally came up in terms of flutterboards versus tubes. And anecdotally, this person stated that the research or the data they have for their province is roughly a 25% split flutterboards, 75% tubes for the entire province, where pools have an affiliation with the Life Saving Society. So I don't know the numbers, but let's say there's 400 pools in the province. 100 of them are still using flutterboards or kickboards as their primary rescue aid. And if the Life Saving Society executive director in that province is not concerned, it's because it's not a policy. It's not in the PNP. It's not in the award guides. It's not in the lesson plans. It's not a national standard. And so then to see in another province, another instructor saying, well, you need 50 newtons of buoyancy to be a licensed lifeguard in Canada. That's a great concept. That could be a great training recommendation in your national lifeguard class. That could be a requirement on the job at your facility, but that is not factual to the program as it exists in Canada. And I even dive into standards. So in my consulting work, when I work with larger projects, I have one right now that has caused me to really dive into the voluntary standards, for example, in Life Saving Society Ontario. I have read every Life Saving Ontario voluntary standard, as well as the Federal Canada Life Saving Society national voluntary standards. Some are lower, some are higher, some have been repealed or abrogated, but I have literally read every single voluntary standard. So I don't like to be a troll either, but I can come with receipts. And so the reason I'm making this video is not to shame the specific people who engaged with the content on a Sunday morning. I'm grateful for the engagement. Thank you kindly. But I continue to see this problem, and I'm going to keep addressing it every time it comes up, whether it is single guards, whether it is the toe turning technique for unconscious victims, whether it's single rescuer lifts, whether it's flutterboards, or whether it's any number of comments that I continue to get on YouTube regarding, well, that's not the right technique. I wouldn't post it on the internet if I wasn't absolutely confident in my information. Now, I recognize in the age of misinformation, fake news, AI, Most organizations don't have that same trust factor or that same ethos regarding what they are and aren't going to post. But if you are looking at Lakeview Aquatic Consultants content, it is produced currently by me, Katie Kreisdale. In the future, we're going to have more help with that, but it goes through a very strict process. And I'm not just posting and ghosting. I'm not just making content to post it. There is a reason, there is a purpose, a lesson, a point I want to make. And then the other thing I want to say for those of you who may be unaware of this, because again, I really do try and downplay it. I don't want to make it a flex. I don't want to like flaunt it in people's faces. But I go to over 100 swimming pools every calendar year, easily. And I'm not talking about going to a water park that has 18 basins and water slides and calling that 18 basins. No, I'm talking about I visit indoor pools, outdoor pools, spray parks, splash pads, amusement parks, cruise ship pools, international pools. This week alone, I've only been to 3, but 2 weeks ago, my colleague was in town. I took them to 6 facilities. Some of you might recall my Saskatchewan trip from early 2021. I did 16 pools in 5 days. I do this to educate and inform myself as a consultant, and that's why our rate is so expensive, because I can literally talk about confidently with photos that I've taken, with contacts that I've spoken to. I can talk to trends as I see them. Saskatchewan, Alberta, the US, water slides, lifeguards, uniforms. I'm not a master of everything. I will be very clear. Hey, I don't know as much about raft conveyor belts for amusement water slides, but here's the ones I have seen. Here's the brands I are aware of. Here are the issues I know to be present. And I can put you in touch with this person and this person to ask more detailed questions. Or often, what I will do for myself as a consultant is I will invest the time to do the research myself. I'm not billing it back to the client if it's a value added that I need to have for my business to be more well rounded. And that's the thing. I can't put that into a caption on an Instagram post or a Facebook post. Doesn't make sense on its own. But I do want to reiterate that if you're here, if you're following, if you're watching this content is not financially produced or supported. It is completely done for free. So I'm not taking brand deals to make these videos. I'm doing these videos literally because I feel that there is misinformation in the industry and there's a lack of transparency in terms of the facts versus the preferences. At least one day a week, I get a comment from a National Lifeguard candidate who's confused about the program that they're taking because, respectfully, their instructor or trainer has not been clear on award guide items or must-sees. They're fudging their own preferences, their own experiences, or their own laziness, and that is not acceptable. I know the Life Saving Society branches in each Canadian province. They are very limited in staffing and manpower, and nobody wants to hunt down instructors who need some remedial coaching or, eject them from the society altogether. They're leadership volunteers. We're all working towards water safety and drowning prevention as a mandate, Canada Free from Drowning. Many people are doing the best that they can. But when you have people doubling down on false information, claiming that my information is wrong and my information is grounded in the facts, I'm not personally offended. Like I said, I'm a big girl, but I am very concerned for the future of our industry and for the what should be open conversations that we need to be having. In Life Saving Society, we have the leadership model where there's self feedback. I give feedback regarding my performance. I'm meant to receive peer feedback from my colleagues, how they perceived my performance, whether it's teaching a swim lesson or doing a rescue. And then I'm meant to receive feedback from my trainer or from my instructor or from my supervisor. All of those layers of feedback are valid and they're rarely based on preference. I say this all the time as a trainer for swim instructor. You can't just say, well, I liked your game. Did the game have an aim? Did the game meet a purpose? We want to remove the preference until we have time to talk about the preference. If there's time at the end, then we can say, yeah, I loved your game. It was super creative. Or, yeah, I would have done the same thing too. But factually, we need to always come back to the resources. As of right now in Canada, many Canadian provinces use the National Lifeguard Program as the gold standard for lifeguarding. There is nowhere in National Lifeguard resources that prohibits the use of flutterboards or kickboards. Your employer, your organization, your job may do so. That is allowed. But in the licensing course, National Lifeguard Pool Original, my expertise is pool. I haven't done waterfront, surf, etc. Recertification, you can use a flutterboard or kickboard. If you're not competent with it, absolutely, you could fail the recertification of the course. If you have access to something better and you're not competent with that either, that's not helpful either. So, to wrap up this video, I want to say thank you to those people who continue to follow and support what we're doing in terms of content. I had a number of comments that were very meaningful for me, direct messages, people reiterating their own lived experiences, their own knowledge of the material. I do appreciate hearing that because there's always that split second where you're thinking, did I get it wrong? But usually I double and triple check everything before I post it, and then once it starts to snowball and go viral, I also double and triple check it. So, I hope we can reach a point where acceptance of differences, right? This is shouldn't be, but like the multiculturalism of Canada, the multiculturalism of aquatics, we're a mosaic, not a melting pot. If there's a clear reason for something, absolutely. I'm not saying, new agey, do whatever you want, there's no consequences. But I think this is part of one of our problems in aquatics. We want to be taken seriously. There's this movement in jurisdictions to say lifeguards are first responders, but we're not being as professional as some of these other agencies or groups that are supporting the same mandate. What does it matter if I use a flutterboard or a kickboard? If I can use it well, you can use it too. Oh well, big deal. That's it for today. Thanks so much for watching. I will catch you in the next video. Bye for now.